Hey everyone, this is a document that is an appendix to Matthias Kunzel's um, Nazis, anti. What a lovely way to start a video. Islamic anti-Semitism in the Middle East, the 1948 Arab War against Israel, and the aftershocks of World War II. There we go. The appendix is titled Appeal of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem to the Islamic World in 1937. So this is by Amin al-Husseini. Since the beginning of their history, the Jews have always been an oppressed people, and there must surely be a good reason for this. The Egyptian pharaohs were obliged to take energetic measures of repression against the Jews, who had exploited the Egyptian people and undermined popular morale through usury and various other crimes. In the end, there remained no other choice but to expel the Jews from the country, and under Moses' leadership they passed across the Red Sea. As the famous Arab theologian Tabari relates, the Jews wanted to kill Moses when he returned from Mount Sinai. I'm not sure if this is the right person, so I don't want to say. I'm going to go for it. On Wikipedia, there's an entry for an al-Tabari, who lived from 839 to 923 CE. He was a Sunni Muslim scholar, polymath, historian, exegete, jurist, and theologian from Amal, Tabaristan, present-day Iran. Among the most prominent figures of the Islamic Golden Age, al-Tabari is widely known for his historical works and expertise in Quranic exegesis and has been described as, quote, an impressively prolific polymath, end quote. Al-Tabari authored works on a diverse range of subjects, including world history, poetry, lexicography, grammar, ethics, mathematics, and medicine. Among his most famous and influential works are his Quranic commentary, Tafsir al-Tabari, and historical chronicle, Tariq al-Tabari. Al-Tabari followed the Shafi'i school, Shafi', school, for nearly a decade before he developed his own interpretation of Islamic jurisprudence. Al-Tabari's understanding of Islamic jurisprudence was both sophisticated and remarkably fluid, and as such, Al-Tabari continued to develop Al-Tabari's ideas and thoughts on juristic matters right until the end of his life. Al-Tabari's school of jurisprudence, quote, flourished among the Sunni ulama for 2 centuries after his death, end quote, before it eventually became extinct. It was commonly designated as the Jariri school. Back to the text. As punishment for this crime and for their apostasy from God, God made them wander for 40 years in the desert. Through this penance, the new generation that was born in this period had the opportunity to wipe away the sins of the fathers and return to the path of God. The new generation did indeed spread out across Mecca, Medina, Syria, and Iraq, the lands that flowed with milk and honey. However, this generation was even worse than the preceding generation, reflecting the Arab saying that, quote, a dog had a puppy, but the puppy was still more dog-like than its begetter, end quote. Those of the Jews who had come to Syria and Palestine then fell under Roman rule. Very soon the Romans recognized the danger the Jews posed to the country and enacted severe measures against them. Moreover, at that time a serious epidemic, the plague, broke out that was generally believed to have been introduced by the Jews. Even when the doctors too had declared that the Jews were the center of the disease, which may well have been true, the people became so angry that many Jews were killed. This event is the reason why to this day the Jews are called, quote, microbes, unquote. Because of this, Arabs are especially well placed to understand the fact that in Germany, likewise, energetic measures have been taken against the Jews, and they have been chased away like mangy dogs. The Arabs, however, are the victims of this, since the Jews, in large part from Germany, have moved to Palestine. There the Jewish scum from every country is assembled in order to take the Arabs' country. They have bought up land from the poorest of the poor and from unscrupulous landowners. They have stolen the bread from the mouth of the poor widow and taken the milk from the children in order to gorge themselves. They have not shrunk even from committing bloody murders when Arabs have opposed Jewish immigration, and have robbed many families of their breadwinner and condemned them to poverty. Quote, God will punish them for these foul deeds, unquote. The struggle of the Jews against the Arabs is nothing new, only the venue has changed in the course of time. The Jews hate Muhammad and Islam, and anyone who wants to support his own people and fight against Jewish miserliness and corruption. The struggle between the Jews and Islam began when Muhammad fled from Mecca to Medina, where he laid the foundations for the development of Islam. Even in those days, the Jews were great businessmen and immediately sensed that Muhammad's influence was a danger to the Jews in both the spiritual and commercial spheres. The Jews therefore developed a great hatred of Islam, and this hatred of Islam increased more and more as Islam grew stronger and mightier. The Jews broke the Khaybar agreement that they made with Muhammad, and their anger reached a peak when the Quran revealed their deepest psychological impulses and exposed their unscrupulousness and lack of conscience, and so made these things generally known. And the Khaybar agreement, there's not like a Wikipedia for that, but just look at the battle. There's one for there's a Wikipedia for it, for the Battle of Khaybar. The Battle of Khaybar was an armed confrontation between the early Muslims and the Jewish community of Khaybar in 628 CE. Khaybar, which is located approximately 150 kilometers, 93 miles to the northwest of Medina, was home to a sizable community of Jewish tribes. As Muhammad's army began to march on Khaybar, the Banu Ghatafan and other Jewish allied Arabian tribes did not, or could not, send the reinforcements that had been expected to arrive to defend the settlement, further endangering the Jewish army's poor fortifications. After a brief period of fighting, Khaybar fell to the Muslims, and the Jewish commander, Marhab ibn al-Harith, was killed, reportedly by Ali ibn Abi Talib. The terms of surrender presented to the oasis after the Muslim conquest stipulated the seizure of the Jews' wealth and also called for every non-Muslim to pay tribute, jizya, to the Muslims in exchange for universal conflict neutrality, with protection of emigrate smooth protection, or emigrate from Khaybar, bolstering the Muslim army in a significant development of Muhammad's military career. In exchange for their acceptance of the terms, the Muslims agreed to cease their campaign against Banu Qurayza and other local tribes. Despite forces consisting of 10 to 20,000 Jews versus 1,400 Muslims, deaths were remarkably low at 93 Jews and 18 Muslims, with 50 injured between parties. Since the late 20th century, Muhammad's conquest of Khaybar's Jewish community has become notable as the subject of an Arab language rallying slogan, Khaybar, Khaybar, Ya Yahud, in the context of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Just as a side note, when I was looking this up, if you look at Khaybar disambiguation, apparently there's a Khaybar 1, a Syrian-made rocket widely used in the 2006 Lebanon war by Hezbollah against Israel. There's a bullpup assault rifle from Iran called the KH-202 Khaybar. And there's other uses. There's other names for weapons that have this title. Khaybar in present-day Saudi Arabia. Khaybar, Khaybar, Ya Yahud. Khaybar, Khaybar, Ya Yahud. Jaish Muhammad, Sufa Yahud. Which translates as Khaybar, Khaybar, O Jews, the army of Muhammad will return, is an Arabic language rallying slogan referencing the Battle of Khaybar of 628 CE, which began after Muhammad marched with a large Muslim army and besieged Khaybar, an oasis in present-day Saudi Arabia that was home to an established Jewish community. Khaybar, Khaybar, Ya Yahud, Jaish Muhammad, Sufa Yahud, is chanted primarily at public anti-Israel demonstrations, though it has been invoked during Islamist terror attacks as well. The chant has been categorized as anti-Semitic by the American news broadcaster PBS, the Israeli newspaper The Times of Israel, the British advocacy group Muslims Against Antisemitism, and the American advocacy group Anti-Defamation League. The slogan was coined in the late 1980s during the First Intifada by Ahmed Yassin, founder of the militant Palestinian Islamist organization Hamas. Back to the text. And the Jewish methods then were the same as they are today. Their weapon was, as always, slander, and they tried to disparage Muhammad in the eyes of Muhammad's followers. The Jews said that Muhammad was a swindler, a magician, and a liar, and when that did not succeed, the Jews tried to undermine Muhammad's honor by spreading the rumor that Muhammad's wife, Aisha, had committed adultery. By spreading these rumors and assertions, the Jews wanted to cast doubt into the hearts of Muhammad's followers. And when this did not work, the Jews tried to discredit Muhammad's teachings. To that end, some Jews converted to Islam in order on the very next day to return to the Jewish religion. When asked about this sudden reversal, they slyly declared that they had tried out Islam in goodwill, but had to conclude that it was all just a lie. In this respect, the Quran says, quote, Many of the people of the book wish they could make you unbelievers again, after you had become believers. The envy in their souls after the truth had become clear to them. End quote. 2:103. Footnote: the correct Quranic reference is 2:109. Other corrected Quranic references appear in footnotes where appropriate. Translator's comment. End footnote. When the Jews understood the impossibility of reaching their goal through the means they had hitherto used, they sought a new approach. They began to ask Muhammad senseless and insoluble questions, thereby wishing to show others that Muhammad lacked knowledge and wisdom. But with this method too, just as before, they had no success. So they came to the conclusion that Islam is very firmly anchored in the hearts of the Muslims, and therefore strove to destroy the Muslims. The Jews committed the cowardly crime of paying some non-Muslim Arab tribes to fight against Muhammad. But Almighty God wished otherwise, and Muhammad crushed the rebellious tribes with an iron fist and captured the city. Their city. The Jews could not bear this defeat and decided to destroy Muhammad at any price and hired murderers for this purpose. In Medina, the Jews lived in the Banu Nadir district. And after he came to Medina, Muhammad made an agreement with them. One day he made his way to the district with only 10 companions in order to talk to the Jews and bring the Jews to Islam. Muhammad laid out the basic principles of Islam to the Jews, and the Jews appeared very interested and approachable. While therefore Muhammad was engaged in friendly discussion with some of the Jews, others prepared an attempt on his life. They persuaded a man to hurl a heavy lump of rock at Muhammad's head. Muhammad would very possibly have been lost if God had not given him a warning. An inner voice urged him to leave the place so that the treacherous Jews were unable to carry out their plan. Muhammad sent one of his followers to the Jews to inform them that they must leave the city within 10 days, since they had broken their agreement with him by attempting to take his life. Any Jew found still to be in the city after 10 days would be punished by death. But some of the Jews who had outwardly adopted Islam but had inwardly remained Jews convinced the other Jews not to leave the city. When, therefore, the 10-day deadline had passed, Muhammad was compelled to drive the Jews out of the city by force of arms. Some of these Jews fled to Khaybar and others to Syria. And just real quick, the Banu Nadir were a Jewish Arab tribe that lived in northern Arabia at the oasis of Medina until the 7th century. They are probably a part of the constitution of Medina, which is formed after Muhammad's Hijrah. Tensions rose between the Muslims and the Banu Nadir after the Battle of Uhud, which prompted a clash between the two, resulting in the expulsion of the Jews of Banu Nadir. Banu Nadir then planned the Battle of the Trench together with the Quraysh, and later participated in the Battle of Khaybar. Back to the text. The Quran refers to this as follows: "It was he who has driven these people of the book who were unbelieving from their dwellings in the first banishment. You do not think that they would leave, and they themselves thought their citadels would protect them from God. But God came to them from where they did not imagine, and cast fear into their hearts, so that they destroyed their houses with their hands and with the hands of the believers. So heed the example, O you who have eyes. End quote. That's 59:2 in the Quran. And he, I should add, was capitalized here, so I'm assuming that refers to Muhammad. I'm not sure. The Jews that fled to Khaybar did not consider themselves defeated and decided to take the revenge of Muhammad. They approached the other Jews in Khaybar as well as the Jews in Tama and Wadi al-Qura and hatched a plot. With the help of much money, they incited the non-Muslim Arab tribes to attack Medina. When Muhammad learned of this plan, he swiftly armed his people and marched upon Khaybar, the center of the revolutionary plans. The Muhammadans captured Khaybar and drove out most of the Jews, while Muhammad made an agreement with the remaining Jews and thereby secured peace. Only after this decisive battle could the Islamic Empire develop peacefully. Given the Jewish character, however, it is no surprise that despite the agreement, the Jews did not give up their evil plans and sought by every means to destroy Muhammad. They invited Muhammad to a banquet, and he unsuspectingly accepted the invitation. Splendidly roasted lamb was set before him and offered him by Zainab, the Jewish, the wife of Salam ibn Mishkam. Wikipedia says Salam ibn Mishkam died 628, was a Jewish warrior, rabbi, and poet who lived in Medina, Arabia in the early 7th century. Back to the text. The talk was of the agreement and the harmony that now prevailed, and nothing was further from Muhammad's mind than any idea of betrayal. Muhammad and his faithful follower, Bashir ibn al-Bara, each took a piece of the lamb. However, Muhammad did not swallow his piece, since he detected an odd taste, and said, quote, "The bone is telling me that the lamb is poisoned." Muhammad had Zainab, the Jewish, brought to him and asked her whether the meat was in fact poisoned. Zainab replied, quote, Zainab replied, "You know that I am held in high regard by the Jews, and I confess that I have poisoned the lamb. But in doing so, I was thinking that if you are only a king, I would kill a king, but if you are a true prophet, you would know that the meat was poisoned." Muhammad's companion died from the poison. End quote. However, the little bit of poison that got into Muhammad's tongue continued to make itself felt, and some historians attribute Muhammad's death to this. In doing so, they rely on a hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah, according to which, shortly before his death, Muhammad said, "The meal of Khaybar continues to make itself felt, and will do so until I am dead." Wikipedia says, Abu Hurairah lived from 603 to 679, commonly known as Abu Hurairah. Oh, sorry, I skipped his long name, which literally translates as father of a kitten. Was a companion of the Islamic prophet Muhammad and considered the most prolific hadith narrator, born in Al-Jubur, Arabia, to the Banu Dals clan of the Zaran tribe. Abu Hurairah was among the first people to accept Islam and later became a member of the Sufa after the migration of Muhammad. Under Muhammad, Hurairah was sent as a Mu'azzin to Al-Allah al-Hadrami in Bahrain. Under the reign of Rashidun Caliph Umar from 634 to 644, Hurairah briefly served as a governor of Bahrain. After being accused of corruption by Umar, he left the governorship and returned to Medina. Acknowledged by Sunni scholars for his notable photographic memory, he memorized massive numbers of over 5,000 hadiths, which later produced more than 500,000 narrator chains, making Abu Hurairah an example followed by the Sunni hadith scholars today. The four major Sunni madhahib have all used hadith narrated by Hurairah in major jurisprudential decisions. However, non-Sunni scholars, including several Shia scholars, have regarded Hurairah as unreliable and telling lies. Back to the text. The Mohammedans must always remain mindful of the meal in Khaybar. If the Jews could betray Muhammad in this way, how may they betray them today? The Jews were now convinced that Muhammad's person was protected against any attack, and therefore decided to sow discord among the tribes in order to break Islam's power. When Muhammad returned to Medina, Muhammad succeeded in reconciling the tribes of the Aus and Khazraj, who had been at war with one another for 120 years, and thus enormously strengthened the position of Islam. Under the banner of Islam, these two hostile tribes became true brothers, and peace was brought to the city. This was also the point at which the Jews sought to undermine the Islamic realm. One day, a vengeful old Jew, Shas ibn Qais, was passing with his friend across a square in which a meeting of two reconciled tribes was taking place. He could not bear to see the two tribes that had fought so many battles with one another peacefully united, and hatched a devilish plan. Shas ibn Qais sent his friend, who was well versed in the war stories of former times, and told him to recite the old songs of hate in the gathering. The Jew, who was a skilled orator, went up to the gathering and began to recite the old battle songs of the two tribes. The Jew succeeded in finding one man from each tribe in whom the old hatred flared up anew. These two began to fight with one another and called their tribal brothers to arms. An incalculable disaster would have occurred if Muhammad, as soon as he received news of this civil strife, had not hurried to the scene. Muhammad cried out, "O my God, must the old times return while I am still with you? After Islam was given to you as a religion, the old tribal feuds were buried and in your hearts you became brothers. Do you want to fall back into unbelief?" Muhammad. By now the two tribes had realized that only through the Jews had the strife between them been sown. They threw down their weapons, begged God for forgiveness, and embraced one another and made a new pact of brotherhood. Concerning the Jew, Shas ibn Qais, the Quran says, quote, "O people of the book, why do you hold back the one who believes from the path of God, when you yourself are witnesses? But he does not overlook what you are doing." Unquote. And about the two tribes, Aus and Khazraj, it is said, and this is a quote from the Quran, quote, "O you who believe, you are obeying a part of those who receive the scripture, who are making you into infidels again. After you became believers, how can you be unbelieving when God's verses have been read to you and his messenger is among you? He who holds fast to God is already on the right path." Unquote. And that's from... One second. That's from Quran 3:100 to 3:101. But in spite of all their efforts, the Jews did not succeed in sowing discord among Muhammad's followers and leading them back to unbelief. Although the Jews must have seen the futility of their efforts, they continued to try to implement their diabolical plans. And this time they tried to bring down Muhammad himself through a trick. Two Jewish tribes were in conflict. The party that was in the wrong held a meeting and sent their leaders to Muhammad. The Jewish leaders said to Muhammad, quote, "You know that we are very influential men. If you judge the dispute in our favor, we will use our influence to convert all the Jews to Islam." Unquote. I don't know if that's a quote. If that's a quote from anything. It might be from the Quran. It goes without saying that Muhammad rejected this proposal. In this respect, the Quran says, quote, "that you make your decisions according to that which God reveals, and do not follow their desires. Be cautious in their presence, so that they do not divert you from a part of what God reveals to you. If they turn away, know that God will surely strike them for some of their sins. Truly, many people are malefactors." And that's from Quran 5:49. A further example of the subversive activity of the Jews is narrated by Ibn Abbas. Ibn Abbas, according to Wikipedia, was one of the cousins of the Prophet Muhammad. Ibn Abbas is considered to be the greatest mufassir of the Quran. ibn Abbas was the son of Abbas ibn Abd al-Muttalib, an uncle of Muhammad, and a nephew of Maymuna bint al-Harith, who later became Muhammad's wife. During the early struggles for the caliphate, Ibn Abbas supported Ali and was made governor of Basra. He withdrew to Mecca shortly afterwards. During the reign of Muawiyah I, Ibn Abbas lived in Hejaz and often traveled to Damascus. After Muawiyah I died in 680 CE, Ibn Abbas migrated to Taif, where he is resting from around 687 CE. Weird sentence for a Wikipedia article. Abd Allah ibn Abbas was highly regarded for his knowledge of traditions and his critical interpretation of the Quran. From early on, he gathered information from other companions of Muhammad and gave classes and wrote commentaries. Back to the text. At the time when Muhammad went from Mecca to Medina, the direction of prayer was towards Jerusalem. This situation lasted only 17 months until Muhammad received a divine revelation changing the direction of prayer henceforth towards Mecca. And since then the prayer has always been said with the face turned towards Mecca. The Quran says in this regard, quote, "We see you turn your face to heaven. Now we want to turn your face in a direction agreeable to you. Turn your face in the direction of the holy place of prayer. And wherever you find yourself, turn your face in this direction. Behold, those who receive the scripture know that this is the truth from their Lord, and God does not overlook what they do." End quote. Quran 2:144. When the Jews heard these verses of the Quran, they were very angry and proposed to Muhammad that he restore the original direction of prayer towards Jerusalem. If he were to do so, they promised him all the Jews would accept Islam. Muhammad, however, did not allow himself to be swayed by this request to repudiate the divine instruction. Thus we read in the Quran, quote, "We are changing the direction you turn for prayer, only so that we may distinguish him who follows the messenger from him who turns on his heel. This was surely difficult, but not for those whom God guides. And God will not destroy your faith, for behold, God is all gracious and all merciful to people." End quote. Quran 2:143. And here is yet another example of how the Jews did not shrink even from stabbing Muhammad in the back in times of greatest peril. When Muhammad had won the battle of Badr, he sent an emissary on his own camel, because it was the swiftest, to Medina to bring the news of his victory there. Wikipedia says the Battle of Badr, or sometimes called the Raid of Badr, also referred to as the Day of the Criterion, in the Quran and by Muslims, was fought on the 13th of March 624 CE, near the present-day city of Badr, al-Medina province in Saudi Arabia. Muhammad, commanding an army of his Sahaba, defeated an army of the Quraysh led by Amir ibn Hisham, better known among Muslims as Abu Jahl, The battle marked the beginning of the 6-year war between Muhammad and Muhammad's tribe. The Battle of Badr took place after 5 or 6 unsuccessful attempts by the Muslims to intercept and raid Mecca trade caravans between 623 and early 624 CE. Muhammad took keen interest in capturing Meccan caravans and their wealth after his migration to Medina. A few days before the battle, when he learnt of a Meccan caravan returning from the Levant led by Abu Sufyan ibn Harb, Muhammad gathered a small expeditionary force to raid it. Abu Sufyan, learning of the Muslim plan to ambush his caravan, changed course and took a longer route away from Muhammad's base at Medina and sent a messenger to Mecca asking for help. Amr ibn Hisham commanded an army nearly 2,000 strong, approaching Badr and encamping at the sand dune al-Udwatul Quswa. Badr was the first large-scale engagement between the Muslims and Quraysh Meccans. Advancing from the north, the Muslims faced the Meccans. The battle began with duels between the warriors on both sides, following which the Meccans charged upon the Muslims under a cover of arrows. The Muslims countered their charge and broke the Meccan lines, killing several important Qurayshi leaders, including Abu Jahl and Umayyah ibn Khalaf. The Muslim victory strengthened Muhammad's position. The Medinese eagerly joined his future expeditions, and tribes outside Medina openly allied with Muhammad. The battle has been passed down in Islamic history as a decisive victory attributable to divine intervention and by other sources to the strategic prowess of Muhammad. Okay. Back to the text. When Muhammad had won the Battle of Badr, he sent an emissary on his own camel, because it was the swiftest, to Medina to bring the news of his victory there. But the Jews tried to sow confusion in the ranks of the Muslims and demoralize Muhammad's companions in arms by spreading the lie that Muhammad had fallen in the battle. As proof, they cited the fact that Muhammad's camel had returned to the city with a strange rider upon it. But when this plan too proved unsuccessful, some of the Jews went to Mecca and tried to incite Muhammad's enemies against him. They even declared themselves ready to support the Meccans in their struggle against Muhammad with an army. When the heathen Meccans asked the Jews whether Muhammad's religion was good, since the Jews even before Muhammad had received a holy scripture, the Jews said, quote, "You know that we are men of science, so believe us when we tell you that your religion is far better." End quote. And I guess your religion being the heathen religion. In the Quran, the following is said about this, quote, "Do you not see those who receive a portion of the scripture? They believe in Jibt and Taghut, but they say of those who do not believe that they are better guided on the path than those who believe. They are the ones whom God has cursed, and whoever God curses, you will find no helper for him." End quote. Quran. Four 51 to 52. And it can be seen how this curse has been proven true. The Jews are scattered outcasts all over the earth, and nowhere do they find true help and support. There is a further verse in the Quran that quite unmistakably describes the attitude of Islam to Judaism. It reads, Quote, "You will certainly find that the Jews and the idolaters harbor the strongest hostility to those who believe." End quote. Quran. (582) or 582, I should say, 582. And a remark of Muhammad's expresses this idea even more clearly. Quote, "It will never be possible to see a Muslim and a Jew together without the Jews having the secret intention of destroying the Muslim." End quote. Ibn Huraira narrates the following hadith. Quote, "The hour, the resurrection, will only come when the Muslims have inflicted a crushing defeat on the Jews. When every stone and every tree behind which a Jew has hidden says to the Muslim, quote, 'There is a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him,' end quote. Only the garkad tree, a little shrub with sharp thorns from the region of Jerusalem, will not take part, for it is a Jewish tree." End quote. Bukhari Muslim 8, page 188, footnote. The correct references are Muslim volume 41, 6985, Bukhari volume 52, 177. End footnote. The reason for the above discussions is that the Jews are on the verge of reaching out to take the holy places that are holy for every Muslim and every Christian. The Islamic world and the friends of the Muslims must be shown that the Jews are really what the Jews are really like in their innermost being. We only see Jews with the veneer of civilization, but the Arabs know best how they really are. And when someone has come to understand the Jews as they are, the Arabs, and when someone has come to understand the Jews as they, bracket, the Arabs, and bracket, do, that is, as the Jews are depicted in the Quran and Holy Scriptures, then one will understand the torments to which the Arabs in Palestine have already been subjected, and can imagine how these torments will increase immeasurably if the Jews ever take full possession of Palestine. To my Muslim brothers of the whole world, I present the history and the true experience that the Jews cannot deny. The verses from the Quran and the Hadiths prove to you that the Jews have been the most bitter foes of Islam and are still trying to destroy it. Do not believe them. They know only hypocrisy and guile. Keep faith, fight for the Islamic idea, fight for your religion and existence. Do not rest until your land is free from the Jews. Do not tolerate the partition plan, for Palestine has been for centuries an Arab country and must always remain so. And that's the end of the piece, and its source was from a book from Nazi-era Germany by a Mohammed Sabri titled Islam, Judentum, Bolshevismus. So Islam, I don't know, Judaism and Bolshevism, I'm not sure. Published in Berlin, 1938. Thank you so much for listening and allowing me to look things up.